The US president has announced the defeat of Islamic State in Syria. It came in a tweet at the end. Donald Trump took to Twitter, giving the US and himself much of the credit for the victory over the terrorists.
We have defeated ISIS in Syria. My only reason for being there during the Trump presidency.
We now have official confirmation that U.S. troops will be leaving Syria. Now, President Trump's tweet contradicts everything that we've been hearing from the State Department and the Pentagon over the last several months. Here's what the head of the coalition to defeat ISIS said just over a week ago.
We want to see a resolution to the Syrian civil war through the UN Security Council resolution process. And we also want to see the removal of foreign forces from Syria, particularly the Iranian commanded and proxy forces from Syria. It's fair to say Americans will remain on the ground after the physical defeat of the caliphate until we have the pieces in place to ensure that that defeat is enduring.
Now, there are at least 2,000 U.S. troops in Syria, and removing them would be fulfillment of one of President Trump's campaign promises. Now, Vice President Mike Pence and the Secretary of Defense, Jim Mattis, are meeting right now in the Pentagon. White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders released a statement saying the process of returning troops back to the U.S. has actually already begun. Now, the statement also says that this doesn't signal the end of the global coalition to defeat ISIS or its campaign. Now, ISIS has been defeated in the sense it holds no territory. Perhaps President Trump is overstating the U.S. role in that effort. ISIS was largely defeated by the Syrian and Russian militaries, along with the Lebanese group Hezbollah. Now, the timing here is very curious. Turkey is threatening an offensive on U.S.-backed Kurdish forces in northern Syria, and President Erdogan has demanded that the U.S.-backed forces withdraw and said that the operation to attack them could start any moment. So Turkey is unlikely to attack U.S. forces, and this could very much factor into President Trump's decision to remove American forces.
Dan Cohen there in Washington, Igor Zhdanov, our correspondent, with me here in Moscow. So, President Trump taking pretty much, well, in usual form, the credit for all this, by the looks of it, for defeating ISIS, although it was only really in the, he's coming at the very latter end of all this, isn't he?
Well, yeah, it's not the first time that Donald Trump announces the withdrawal of troops from Syria, but last time that happened, he backtracked pretty quickly, U-turning and staying in Syria for another year or so. Well, now, yeah, indeed, and he is taking the credit for it, and just to give him the credit that he deserves, and really, the United States did do a lot to defeat ISIL in Syria. I mean, that can't really be taken from them. They pretty much liberated all of the eastern and northern, much of the northern Syrian regions. Of course, not their soldiers, not their troops, but their proxy sort of army as the Kurds. I mean, the self-proclaimed capital of the caliphate, Raqqa, was liberated by the United States and their allies. Although all that does come with a big but, excuse the phrase. So the thing is the means that because they did kick ISIL out with their favorite tool, with their favorite approach, and that is blunt, stupid force. So that's what they used on Raqqa, for example. They pretty much obliterated the city with bombings. Once a flourishing, prosperous city, now it still lies in ruins. I mean, we've heard a very big outcry coming from human rights groups, for instance, who have been accusing the United States of indiscriminate bombing and even using a term as an annihilation war, and saying that this should be considered a war crime, what the United States bombings did there. Just to give you the scale of how bad it is, bodies are still being found in Raqqa. The campaign ended in 2017.
We were forced to leave our homes because of ISIL. When we returned, we found everything reduced to rubble. Look at all the devastation. Raqqa is a ghost city.
We are living in the midst of destruction. We feel completely abandoned. Everything around has been destroyed.
Life here is horrible. The city lies in rubble. We have to pay to remove the debris with our own money. There's no running water, so we have to buy it in barrels.
The US coalition caused the destruction of Raqqa, and it has a responsibility to rebuild the city. We need their help with restoring the water supply and clearing the rubble.
I found a mine on the street near my house. My friend and I tried to detonate it from a distance, but it didn't go off. We thought the mine didn't work and walked towards it. It exploded. My friend was killed. I survived.
So the White House then confirming US troops, as they put it, but we heard there were troop advisors along the way, but either which way are starting to come out now. Is it going to all happen at once? What's the plan here? What's being said about a timeline for all this?
Well, this is a very good question, I should say, because yes, indeed, right now we're hearing that some of the troops are being withdrawn already. But I mean, the United States, they do kind of send troops in and out of Syria regularly. This is called like military rotation. This is a thing. So they send out a certain number of troops and send back in another group, roughly the same size or so. This is what's been happening in Iraq, for example, in the years that came after the official end of the military campaign there. And this is sort of the question that stands right now with Syria, whether or not, how will they be withdrawing troops? What scale will this withdrawal take? Will it be all of the troops, or will this be again an Iraq or an Afghanistan sort of a situation? So we have no details on this. And I mean, a lot of that stems from the fact that the United States, they sort of have been changing the rules of this game as that said game was ongoing when it comes to why they are in Syria in the first place, because it certainly wasn't an official invitation from the UN-recognized leader Bashar Assad. They entered the country saying they want to fight terrorists, ISIL. So now they've defeated ISIL, and like they had already introduced new reasons and new pretexts as why they should stay. For example, combating and kind of countering Iranian influence in Syria. Well, where did that come from? So now they say that their priorities have shifted again. Have a listen.
Getting Assad out is not the only priority. We know that it is not going to be, there's not any sort of option where a political solution is going to happen with Assad at the head of the regime.
We're not asking for regime change. We're not asking for the Russians to leave. What we're asking for is a compromise settlement. There's a strong readiness on the part of Western nations not to ante up money for that disaster unless we have some kind of idea that the government is ready to compromise and thus not create yet another horror in the years ahead.
So one thing that is obvious is that the United States, they're still unhappy with the Bashar Assad being at the helm of Syria. So they are bound to keep some influence. So they will, in a way, it looks like they will remain there in Syria. Just to what extent is still to be seen. Yeah,
I'm reading some more info on this as well. It seems some of the defense chiefs wanted to keep a presence there. They want to be there to counter what they say the threats from Iran, to counter what they say the threats from Russia, just have more influence there. I wonder if there was some sort of battle going on behind the scenes here between them and Trump and the rest of the White House or whatever. But how were they fighting terrorists towards the end? Because we hear there are still pockets of ISIL in that area, so they're not, ISIL's not completely wiped out.
But I mean, ISIL is not the baddest guy here, and ISIL is not the biggest problem that Syria is facing in terms of terrorism there. I mean, it's al-Nusra, it's the province of Idlib. This is the most festering wound on the flesh of Syria, so to speak. So ISIL doesn't really hold it. ISIL barely holds any territory. It holds a patch of desert on the government-controlled side, and so with nothing much going on there, and a small patch of land on the Kurd-controlled side, and that is the U.S. zone of responsibility. And so in terms of how they've been fighting ISIL in the course of these years, well, one of the most notorious tactics was arming and training the so-called moderate rebels with the assumption that they will fight ISIL and other jihadists. And here's how that turned out.
Can you tell us what the total number of trained fighters remains?
It's a small number, and the ones that are in the fight is we're talking four or five. So.
So the officer there, he did not mix up the decimals or whatever. It's literally out of thousands of fighters that they had trained, they were left with 4 or 5 of them. So, and also, again, that's bombings, that's they've never really had, they've never really had a combat force on the ground. They never really sent boots on the ground to Syria, at least not the ones that they had admitted to. But they did have military advisors with the role of training the Kurds, their proxy force, the proxy boots on the ground force. So these are the main means of fighting ISIL.
Got it. Okay. Well, as it stands at the moment, it seems that at least, just to recap for viewers just joining us, the US confirming those US troops, as they're being described, are being withdrawn from Syria. It looks like it's going to be ASAP, according to President Trump. But as ever, watch this space. For now, Igor Zhdanov, thank you.